Hi guys, and welcome to the first edition of the Behind the Frame series. This is something that I've been doing on Instagram for quite some time now, but have now finally taken the step to putting it onto YouTube, embedding it in our blog, and actually recording a video where you'll be able to get to see how I edit these images as well. So, sticking with the standard behind the frame kind of process, is the first thing is to have a look at the technical specs. So this was shot in the Sabi Sands here in South Africa, a great destination for big cat game viewing, but also capturing these sort of images where we've got another vehicle providing light from behind the subject. We've positioned ourselves, being able to go off-road into a place where we can then make use of the backlighting provided by the other vehicle and guide. The technical specs for this image, it was shot at an ISO value of 6400 at 400 mils on a 400 mil f2.8 lens. Really good lens for nighttime photography in this part of the world because of that maximum aperture of f2.8. Literally just sucking in light and allowing you to actually pick up contrast on the subject. So in this particular image, this is where we would be focusing on the brightest part here where there is contrast and the camera can lock on and engage focus. This was shot at f4, so the subject is sitting directly across from me. The focal plane is pretty much set, so there's not too much to worry about in terms of depth of field. Also, in low light like this, you don't want to be opening up to, or stopping down rather, to f8 or so to get that depth of field, because it's going to mean that your shutter speed is going to decrease, which means that you have to shoot at higher ISO values than what you would want to normally. This was taken at 1/200th of a second, which is less than 1 over focal length, the general guideline for trying to eliminate camera shake in your images. But bearing in mind that I was keeping this very steady, had an image stabilizer on, and the subject was not moving, it works pretty well. Right, onto an editing section for this behind the frame. I like these images as black and white. Obviously, it's quite warm at the moment in terms of the color temperature. You can see here if I change the white balance, you can take that away. And obviously, the spotlights in the evening are a little bit warmer than what we are used to during the daylight hours. So just cooling that down would bring that back in touch. But for me, this image shouts to be converted into black and white. So already here, that's a good starting point. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to crop to my final composition, and I want to try and eliminate as much of the grass on this side here as possible. So I'm thinking we're going to look at doing something along those lines, and I could quite easily have used a spot removal tool to deal with that, but I want to try and keep this natural, so I'm going to crop that out of the bottom part of the frame here. Now, looking at the histogram, something that we always want to do, it makes sense that it's skewed over to the left-hand side, very dark. That's reflecting all of this dark area here, quite a bit in the midtones, and then just a little bit of whites, not quite creeping onto the highlights or anything there. Now, in this image, surprisingly enough, look at the highlights. Where are they? Well, it's just on the edges there where the light is hitting, and that makes sense. So we want to make this a little bit more pronounced. We're going to dial those highlights up, and you can see that already the histogram has been stretched a little bit over to the right-hand side of the frame. I'm going to lift the whites as well, and a bit of clarity. In this particular image, we can lift clarity across the scene because why? Well, we're not making anything in the background more or less sharp or edgy and contrasty by lifting that clarity. I'm going to open up the tone curve panel. I like to lift the lights a little bit, so we're going to add a little bit more contrast into those lighter areas, and the same with the highlights, just to make them pop a little bit more. Now, an interesting one, darks and shadows. Now, you would think that maybe this is as dark as it's going to get, everything's good there, but adding a little bit of contrast into the shadow areas here will eventually just bring this, make sure that this image is pure black. So you may not have noticed it at first, but initially it was actually not pure black. It was more of a dark, really dark gray. So just by dropping the slider here in your tone curve and just darkening and increasing the contrast in those shadow areas means that we've been able to make this nice and pure black. We can even just do the same on our blacks here, just a little bit, pulling that down to a value of -2. I'm quite conservative when it comes to using these sliders. In the detail panel, we want to apply some sharpening here. Now, the most important part in this detail panel, apart from the amount, is masking. So holding down the Alt key and slowly but surely using the masking slider, increasing that. And you'll see that at this stage here, we're actually sharpening noise in these top left and top right sections. That's not detail, that's grain from obviously shooting at ISO 6400. So we're going to mask out until we get to a point where that's all that's left. Those are the areas that we really want to be sharpening in this image. So I'm happy I'm going to leave that there. I'm going to take the amount up to a value of 40 or so, and using my one-to-one preview here gives me a good idea of where we're actually sharpening. You can have a look there. If we hold down the Alt slider and show the masking again, we're actually taking that detail there and just sharpening it up a little bit. I'm not going to apply any noise reduction on this, even though it was shot at ISO 6400. You can see there's no real noise or detail in there that we need to worry about. All the color noise has been dealt with as well. Finally, what we're going to do is apply a subtle vignette, just to drop out some of this grass in the foreground here. So taking the amount, so applying the vignette, bringing the midpoint in a little bit, and feathering it so that it's not left before. So just a quick before and after with that vignette. Very subtle, but you'll see that the bottom part of this image goes away. And actually, looking at it in retrospect now, I think what we can do is, rather than doing that, let us grab a brush, and we're going to apply a localized adjustment here. I'm going to zero all of the effects, drop the exposure a little bit, pull down the whites and the highlights, and we're just going to brush over this area in the front of the subject here. So if you have a look, I hit O for overlay to show you the areas that we're working on. And I've brushed into that section over there, and we've just dropped the exposure a touch. Now, before and after with the brush alone, just have a look at this detail in the bottom left around the line. You can see that we've just dummied that down a little bit by pulling back the whites and the highlights a little on that front. So, as a quick example for you guys, a before and after. Let's have a look. That's before and that's after. Really nice, subtle, nothing major in terms of the effect that we've applied. If we wanted to, we could still apply a bit of a vignette, and we're just going to pull that in just a little bit. And again, looking at the vignette before and after, very subtle, but just darkening these edges around the frame. So again, before and after. Right, that's it for the first edition of the Behind the Frame series. I hope you guys are enjoying it. If you come across images of mine or any of the other Wild Eye team that you would like to see how we went about it, what were the details when it was shot, and how we've processed it, please do drop me a line, let me know, and I'll get the other guys to come in and record some stuff and share it with you. I hope you've enjoyed it. Cheers.